Hi there guys, this is Steve the Bear. Today we're going through the Circle of Orboros book. As I've mentioned a couple of times in previous videos, Circle of Orboros is my primary War Machine and Hordes faction. It is one of the Hordes factions, and I've been collecting them for several years now. I've got pretty much the entire faction. I'm missing a few bits here and there, but apart from that I've got most of it. So we'll start with, I've got the hardback version here. Nice cover, lovely bit of artwork, one of the casters, various units and beasts on the front there. So as you can see, hopefully on the camera there, that you've got the black with the symbol of Circle Orboros in, which is that one. Again, as with all the War Machine and Hordes books, amazing artwork. So we start with a bit of fluff, basically set in 608 AR on the fringes of the Bloodstone Marshes. Basically just to set up how the entire thing goes. A nice bit of artwork there. And this is just catching up sort of post Mark 1 of War Machine and Hordes with where all the various casters are. Then it gets on to sort of the background discussion about how the circle is organised, and just how they go about moving, including the hierarchy of all their casters. An army, basically, which caster has what under their command. And you've got a bit that talks about the tribes of the Wolves and Reeves of Orboros and the Tharn, including the fall and return of the Tharn. And that takes us up to page 24, and then we get onto the theme forces. Now, theme forces are something that I've mentioned in one of my other videos. Theme forces are basically, you get for each caster, there is one theme force in each book that they start in. There are extra theme forces for certain casters available via the No Quarter magazine, and basically it gives you a restricted list of models that you must choose from. So you've got War Beasts, units, solos, and Tier 1 generally is only may pick from that list above and you get a benefit. Tier 2, take this, get a benefit. Tier 3, take this, get a benefit. Tier 4, take this, get a benefit. Now, theme forces, generally speaking, are more fluffy than practical. I think it's probably generally accepted. A lot of the newer ones in the newer books have actually been quite decent and quite a bit better than some of these older ones that are available. So I think it's an effort just to make the theme forces more viable in perhaps competitive play. So we've got a theme force for every single caster that is in the book. So we get on to the Warlocks, and there's a quick description about the wilding, which is basically how a Warlock gains their power. So start with Boulder the Stone Cleaver. There you go, a nice bit of artwork there. Just basically goes through his stats, discusses his feat, discusses abilities that he generically has, as well as abilities of his weapons and his spells, and then puts a bit of fluff in about Boulder himself. Boulder is one of these sort of more unique circle casters in that he almost exclusively supports constructs. He's got a lot of, for a circle caster anyway, he's a very tanky caster. He's got sort of high-ish defense but slightly higher armor, and a lot of things like his feat and various other abilities are more about defensive than pure damage dealing himself. So we've got Cassius the Oathkeeper and Wormwood the Tree of Fate. Cassius is, I will admit, he's an odd one. I haven't actually got round to playtesting him yet, but my understanding is he's quite good because he's actually a debuffer, which we don't have a lot of in Circle. And generally speaking, he's got abilities that help with that sort of Curse of Shadows, which lowers an enemy's armour, and all sorts of things like that. He has a companion, which is Wormwood the Tree of Fate. Again, I must apologise, I haven't actually played Cassius at all yet, so I don't really know quite a lot of how his synergies work and who he'd work best with. Kaya the Wildborn is the starter caster from the Circle starter box. As such, she's very good. She proves out a lot of how Circle work in the fast hit and run style, and basically her abilities and her spells and everything back that up. We then got the first epic version of a caster in this book, which is Kaya. Basically, it's like an evolution of her previous character. She still hits hard, she still hits fast, and she's all about the hit and run. There's no protracted fighting. It's all get in, kill something, get out. Same for her little companion Laris here. He pretty much protects Kaya, and they've got several abilities that allow them to move to each other and things like that. Chromac the Ravenous, he's one of the more favoured circle casters, especially for competitive play, because he has just a nice wider range of abilities. He actually has two forms as well. He has like a human form and a beast form, and basically one means he's a spellcaster, the other means he hits things in the face. But generally speaking, you'll see him a lot of the time in his human form. He might flip to his beast form if he goes for an assassination run, but other than that, he's got great beast support with his spells. He's got a spell denial, because having that 14-inch control area, he can stop enemies casting spells in that with one of his spells, so that's quite decent. Kruger the Stormwrath is basically our anti-infantry warlock. Between his feat and his spell list, he's very good at taking out enemy infantry, so generally you can run him more beast heavy than say you would normally, perhaps, because he can basically chew through a lot of infantry on his own. And then his epic version, again, I haven't played with his epic version that much, but his feat is very good denial feat, pushes enemies away from you, and it lowers their speed, so it prevents them charging the next turn. So it's very good for getting enemies out of zones and then perhaps charging them in your following turn. It's not so good in sort of the post Colossals release, because you can't push a Colossal. However, his combination of spells as well, he's very good at manoeuvring, getting things where you want them to be, whether that be your opponent or yourself. Mosar is actually one of the Circle Omnipotents. Basically at the top of the circle you've got 3, I think it is, really super powerful druids, and he's one of them. Again, he's quite an interesting caster, because he's more of I think sort of like a decay, well, that's probably the wrong phrase, but he's much more of again a debuff caster rather than a pure enhancement caster. Basically the beasts are a mean to an end when he's controlling them. Again, I will say I haven't played many games with him, so I'm not huge, don't really know a massive amount about him. And you've got Morvana the Autumn Blade, much like her epic version, she's very good at supporting infantry, with the combination of spells she has. Again, she's got a very interesting set of spells, interesting feat, interesting different abilities. I will admit I haven't played with her that much either, but she's definitely a cast that would be interesting to give a go. And I know a lot of people talk about her, saying that she's quite good. So we go on to the War Beasts. There's a bit of fluff here about how they make the Wolds, which are the construct beasts that work particularly well with Boulder. And then there's a nice bit of anatomy of a feral Warwolf there. So start with the lights. You've got the Argus, which is, depending on which battle box you've got, you get at least 1, possibly 2 Argi in that. There, I think the problem with the Argus is it's the same points as the Gorax, and we'll get on to how good the Gorax is in a minute. The Argus has its place, but you don't tend to see it that often outside of battle box games, just because for 4 points there are other things in the army that can be taken. I mean, don't get me wrong, it can do a power and strength 16 slam, and it can give out circular vision and pathfinder to war beasts that need it, but I think 4 points, you've got the Gorax. The Gorax is amazing as a support beast. It's a good transfer target, because when it takes damage it gains extra abilities. Its Animus is amazing. Primal, basically +2 strength, +2 mat. Target war beast for a turn, it will frenzy automatically the following turn. However, if you absolutely have to kill something dead, Primal goes a long way to helping. For instance, I've put that on a war beast before and almost one-rounded the Khador Colossal, and I've done this several times now, so it's not just a luck thing, as it were. So having almost taken out a Colossal multiple times with 1 heavy that's half the points cost almost, you know, it's definitely decent, and it's very good to help against any armour skew. The other light's got the Wold Watcher, which is the construct light. it's a model that I've used quite a lot very recently, actually, because I've been testing out one of the theme forces that uses it, and it's surprisingly durable. It has Shield Guard, it has Pathfinder, all of its attacks are magical, and when they kill living or undead they create a 3-inch AoE forest that remains in play for a turn, centred on the dead model. So again, quite useful for like zone control, and protecting casters against ranged assassination. The Wild Weird is something I've always wanted to work and to try, but I can never find a place to fit it in a list. For those 5 points, there are other things that I would rather take, which is a shame. But essentially, it fires lasers at, at enemy spellcasters. Onto the Satyrs. They've just got a 3-in-1 plastic box that will be coming out soon. Hopefully I'll get hold of that and do an unboxing, because there's a third type of Satyr come out, which I'll show you in one of the later book run-throughs. Again, I like them and I like what they do, but I think there are other things in Circle that just come out that little bit better. They've got some really good abilities. One of them's got counter charge, for instance. Sorry, counter slam even. And then it follows the enemy after you counter slam. There are so many good abilities that they both have. I just struggled justifying putting them in lists compared to the actual Warp Wolves, because the Warp Wolves have just more sheer damage output. Speaking of which, these are two of the Warp Wolves. We've got the Feral, one of which comes in the standard box. Basically, all Warp Wolves have 3 abilities every turn that they can morph. So they pick each turn. So, for instance, the Feral can have +2 armor, +2 speed, or +2 strength. Brilliant choice of abilities. The Animus, unfortunately, is a bit subpar. Basically, removes Fury from enemy war beasts, but only by, I think it's 1 point, and it's in that model's command range. So it's not amazing, but it's all right, you know. But it won't work against things like War Machine armies, for instance. It's also got generically power strength 14, 15, and 15 as far as its 3 attacks go. Defense 14, which is very high for a heavy. You know, it's got a very nice stat line, and it's got regeneration. It's an all-round very good beast, and people very quickly learn, especially in like journeyman format, to fear the Feral Warp Wolf because of its insane reach and charge range, especially when coupled with the fact it can morph for +2 speed and be given Pathfinder by one of the Argai. So you've got the Pure Blood. The Pure Blood is more of a support piece. I've got it in one of my lists I'm running at the moment, but I'm struggling to fit it in other lists because other Warp Wolves are better value in my opinion. It can warp for Ghostly, and it can give any other Warp Wolves in its command range Ghostly. Ghostly basically meaning it can ignore terrain penalties. And then it can do Strength. And it can also do Spell Ward, which means it can't be targeted by spells, which is quite good. It's got the regen. Instead of one of the initials, it's actually got a 10-inch POW 14 spray, which is quite nice. And it has the Animus of Wraithbane, basically ignores magical spells that add to a target's armour or defence. And it's a magical weapon itself, if it uses the Animus. So that's quite a nice way of like tweaking out certain models from units. And then you've got the arguably the best of the Warp Wolves, or the non-character Warp Wolves. You've got the Warp Wolf Stalker. For 10 points, it has Pathfinder. It can warp for Prowl, for +2 strength, or for Berserk, which means it can chew through units of infantry. It's got Reach. It's only got 2 initials. That's its major drawback, but apart from that, it's an amazing beast. It's also got an Animus that can give it Sprint, which is if you kill an enemy model during your activation, you can then take a full advance at the end. So you can get in, and then with Reach, it's obviously got that slightly bit further range, and then it can run away again afterwards. It's a brilliant beast, and I must admit I am running one usually in every Circle list at the moment. So we get onto the first of the Construct Wardens, the Wild Warden. Again, it's a very good support beast. It's got Chain Attack, it's got Geomancy, Geomancy being one of its premier abilities. Force it for a point of Fury, and it casts a spell from your caster's spell card that's 3 or less. Really nice, and it can then boost by forcing itself. It's brilliant. He can't cast range of self or control on the spells, but it's a nice beast. It's a little bit pillow-fisted because there isn't, generally speaking, very many ways to buff its damage output, and it is only defense 10, so it can get hit. The Wold Guardian, on the other hand, also brings a lot. Its melee weapons do auto knockdown. Its power strength 17. Models in base-to-base contact with it don't take blast damage. It can't be knocked down itself. If it's maxed on Fury, you can still transfer to it. It's got Pathfinder. It's got 20 armor. It's also got an Animus. It means it takes less damage from ranged attacks. Again, it's a very nice beast. Whether or not you include it generally depends on which caster you're running at the time. Because if you're running a living war beast buffing caster, you generally don't want to be running the Guardian. Having said that, though, because it's such a good transfer target, it does sometimes fall into some other lists as well. Then you've got Megalith, who's the character version of that Wold Warden from the previous page, and basically for 2 points more, he's just that much better. His Animus is a debuff and creates an area of rough terrain for an enemy to try and get through. If you're running either Prime or Epic Boulder, he heals them every turn. He heals himself every turn. He heals Wold Wardens in base-to-base contact with him every turn. He's got Geomancy. His fists are that one little better power and strength. His armour is that one little better. He's got a higher mat, more hitboxes. For those 2 extra points, he's so much better. Obviously, he's limited because he's a character. So we get on to the warriors. There's a small little bit here about the different weapon types, from the Tharn to the Druids to the Wolves of Orboros. It's a nice bit of artwork there of a Tharn Ravager cutting apart a Menoth. Then you've got the Druids, including the unit and the attachment. Now, Druids are a unit that Circle players either love or hate, mostly because of their expensive points cost. But they have a ton of useful abilities. They can create cloud effects. They can push and pull enemy models towards you. They can prevent enemies casting spells within a certain range of them, or targeting your models with spells within a certain range of them. I must admit, I've only used them at the moment in one theme force. I haven't used them a lot in other armies, but I have been using them in Epic Boulder's theme force. We'll get onto Epic Boulder in a future book run through, and I'm liking them. I think the 7-point tag for the 6 and the 9-point tag with the Overseer it's quite expensive, and I think that's the reason they don't generally see a lot of play, at least from me. But like I said, they're an either auto include or a don't touch them with a barge pole for most players, which is a shame because they're nice models. So you've got some of the Wold units now. The Druid Stonewood and Wold Stalkers are one of the best shooting units in Circle at the moment, because they've just got such a high POW, and their range and their threat on there is brilliant. They've got some great little abilities that mean they can either stay still to sacrifice their movement for a bonus to hit and then move back 3 inches afterwards, or it means they get a burst of speed up to get close to the enemy, or they've got a concentrated fire special action, which means for every model that you hit, the damage against the next one is increased. It's quite a nice little... It's good for pinging bits of damage off high armoured jacks like Ghidorah and jacks. The Sentry Stone and Mannequins, I've used them in Prime Boulder's theme force, and they can be quite useful. They're very good at getting in the way, blocking things. They've got a spray. Generally speaking, for their points cost, for 3 points, I can justify putting them in. Not everyone likes them. Again, they're one of those units that some people say, those 3 points on something else, and I like them. They work very well in the theme force, in my opinion, and they're versatile. You've got the Shifting Stones and their UA the Stonekeeper. This is a unit that a lot of people in Circle actually own 2 of because they're so versatile. You can only take 1 Stonekeeper, and he grants the unit stealth, as well as a couple of other abilities for himself, but he's only 1 point, so he's definitely worth it. The stones themselves, they can teleport people, they can heal people, and they can leech fury off war beasts prior to you drawing it in using your caster. So again, very good unit. It's only 2 points for the unit, so you can see why they tend to make it into a lot of Circle army lists. There's also a little trick involving a double teleport to get a beast really far up the field. Reeves of Orboros and their UA, they don't see a lot of play because there are a lot of points. I think they're quite good at threshing infantry. Of course, you've got to have infantry you can hit. That being the problem with the being so much high defence or stealth infantry out there at the moment. Sometimes it's actually difficult to find a target they can be used against. They're starting to come back into fashion now Epic Morvana is in play, and I'll explain why when I do a run through of the book with Epic Morvana. But generally speaking, don't tend to see them a lot, which I think is actually quite nice when people do bring them out, because people get confused as to what they are sometimes. The Blood Trackers and their character UA, Nuala the Huntress, they are a unit that pretty much every single Circle player owns, to my knowledge, just because they're so good for what they do. They come down a bit when an enemy can either ignore stealth or has lots of AoEs they can fling around. But apart from that, they've got Weapon Master with thrown attacks. They've got Prey, so in total they can get like a 12-inch charge off on their prey target. With Nuala, they get Reform and Quick Work, so you can charge in, kill something on the charge, Quick Work another target in the enemy unit, and then at the end of the turn either move backwards or move into the unit. Generally speaking, I tend to use them to go after Winterguard Death Stars when I'm playing, just because they tend to make a mess of them when you put prey on them. And I've been using them a lot in my Epic Morvana theme force, and I've been having a lot of fun with that. So we've got the other Tharn female units. So we've got the Blood Weavers. They're a unit that's got 3 different abilities on their melee weapons, and they've got Gang, Pathfinder, Stealth. For 5 points, they're a nice little unit if you can get use out of them. That's the problem I found. The armies I'm using them in, they're nowhere near the front. They won't actually have a chance to kill anything, and they're better against Hordes than they are against War Machine. I think if I was perhaps to play in perhaps a tournament or something where we use specialists, specialists have basically like a sideboard. If you've played Magic the Gathering, you can swap units in and out from said sideboard specialist list. I'd probably put them in one of my lists, purely in case I was playing against a Hordes army. However, I haven't been able to get the best out of them that I think they're capable of. Tharn Wolf Riders, basically like really fast blood trackers with less model count. Again, I want to give them a better play test than I've been giving them at the moment. But the problem is I've only got the minimum unit of 3, and I could do getting another 2, just so I can try out some flanking manoeuvres with them, just because it'd be really, really interesting to see just how far up the table they can get, given they've got a speed 9. Tharn Ravagers and their UA, the Chieftain. Tharn Ravagers are generally poo-pooed a lot on the all-powerful, all-knowing internet, because of their lowish defensive stats, sort of defense 13, armor 14 with 8 hitboxes. The UA, however, grants them advanced deployment, so generally speaking you're going to be charging enemy lines on turn 2, given they've got reach and speed 6. They're on the charge with the Chieftain, they are equivalent Mat 9 and Power and Strength 15, which actually is enough to worry a heavy War Beast or Warjack. If you're more than likely going to hit them, and the damage output you're putting, you're only at -5 on a Khador Jack. So generally speaking, you tend to make quite a chunk out of them. I quite like them, mostly because I've got the old Mark 1 models and they're very nice. Again, I've been using them in Epic Morvana's theme force, and I've been loving them. They just set that line of engagement so far up the table, and they are. So I think they're surprisingly hard to kill. Probably not as hard as they could be, or as hard as one of the units we'll come to in a minute. But they have their place. Basically, they go in, they kill stuff, they die. But getting that alpha strike, that such a hard-hitting alpha strike from so far away, I find to be really good. They've also got a weapon attachment, which is the Shaman. To be honest, for 2 points, he's not someone I take on a regular basis. I only take him if I'm doing Epic Morvana's theme force, because it lowers the points cost of Tharn weapon attachments and unit attachments. So he makes them just that he's an extra body to soak up damage. Basically, it helps. He's got assault, and the assault attack has got electro leap. So you can take out support models, like say Choir of Menoth if they're hiding behind a Warjack, that sort of thing. This is the unit that tends to see play a lot more than the Tharn Ravagers, which are the Warpborn Skinwalkers. They've got lower defence but higher armour, and they've got, as you can see there, like a ton of extra rules. Combined melee attack, fearless, pathfinder, terror. If one of them takes damage, they all get a speed boost for a turn. They've got +2 armour in melee. You know, they're the same points cost, I believe, as a, let's just quickly check. No, in fact they are 1 point cheaper for one less model. So they are more durable, which I think is probably their appeal. That, and they got a very good UA in one of the more recent books. Wolves of Orboros and the Chieftain Standard, they are the typical 6-10, 6 models, 10 models, points cost 4, points cost 6 melee unit. They're dirt cheap. They're alright. They're, you know, with the Chieftain they get a turn of plus an additional die of damage. So if you know, do that on the charge, they become power strength 9 with 4 dice. You know, that's alright, and they've got combined melee attack. Again, they're alright, they're not amazing, but for their points cost, you know, they can get in there, they can jam the line. Their defensive stats are a bit so-so, but that's not what they're there for, generally speaking. Again, I've seen a lot of people use these in an Epic Morvana list, purely because Epic Morvana can give them things like Carnivore, which is a +2 against living models, which just makes them that little bit nastier. And then we get into the solos. Blackclad Wayfarer and the Druid Wilder, both are actually support solos, but they do different things. The Blackclad Wayfarer essentially increases your threat range, really, because he can be up there at the front of the battle. He's got a spray, he's got to teleport him out, his own model move, or he can increase the threat range of your own charges by tagging an enemy with Hunter's Mark. Whereas the Druid Wilder basically can heal models, can force. Basically, she basically adds like an extra part of your control area to your caster, which means you can force outside of your standard control area. She's also got the ability to cast an Animus for free every turn, or take a load of fury off a war beast. Again, support, generally quite helpful. The Reeve Hunter and the Tharn Ravager Whitemane. The Whitemane is good because basically it means the Ravagers can all run through each other, and he's no sort of slouch in combat himself. As far as the Reeve Hunter goes, generally speaking, he's just a solo version of the Reeves, I suppose. He does give the Reeves themselves extra abilities, and he does actually have quick work as well, so if he kills something in melee he can then shoot something else. And he does ignore a lot of concealment, camouflage and all that sort of thing. So for a solo, actually, he's alright, he's quite nice. He does have certain synergies with Reeves themselves and with the Warwolf solo that we'll get into in a minute. Speaking of which, the Warwolf, it's a nice 1 point, basically solo. Now it has a couple of useful abilities. It's got Hunter, which basically means it ignores forests, concealment and cover when determining line of sight for a charge. It's also got Gang with other warrior models, again quite useful. It takes up to a respectable power and strength 13. The best rule it has, however, is Sick'em, which triggers off Reeves. Basically, if Reeves shoots something, it can immediately charge the target, which means it can either run in its own turn for an insane charge range, you know, 'cause it's going to be running 14 and then charging another 10 from the Sick'em, or it can charge from Sick'em and then I believe it can probably charge in its own phase. Yeah, it looks like it can. And it's a charge attack roll is boosted, so it's probably going to hit. Next, you got a character solo, Lord of the Feast. Much improved, I think, over his Mark 1 version. Again, it's a model I haven't played a lot in Mark 2, and I need to actually get around to giving it a good try out. He has 4 points, however, which I think is probably the reason I haven't played him that often. But he's very good because he can shoot an enemy. He doesn't do any damage to the enemy when he shoots them, but then he appears in base-to-base contact with that enemy, but it can be behind that enemy. So if you want to take out support models, let's say following someone around, or for instance if someone is using a Colossal to hide their caster, shoot the Colossal, appear behind the Colossal and then melee attack the caster, because it can make melee and range attacks in the same turn. You've got another character, he's a Dragoon solo, Wolflord Morag. I believe he's the only thing in Circle that on the charge can roll 5 dice to damage. It requires various things, like you have to be charging because you're a weapon master, and if you're flanking with a model from the Wolves of Orboros unit. But given that he's power and strength 13 anyway, and I believe he makes 2 melee attacks as well a turn. He can make quite a mess, and he's got just reach as well. He's got prowl. He's very good for 5 points. Again, he's someone I do want to give some more extensive testing to. So I've only used him a couple of times, and in those couple of times he was amazing. Especially because, I mean, you kill the wolf he's on, he then actually turns up on foot. But either way, he's quite a solid addition. 5 points, I think, is probably the price tag, however, that causes some people most of the problems trying to squeeze him into a list. So that's the end of the models. So we're on to the army previews. So we're now into just basically like the paintings. So you've got some nice painting models. How farm flesh is painted, particularly the beast flesh, the cloaks on the wolves and reeves of Orboros, and how you create this nice lattice work effect. The bronze, the stone, the nice green glow that comes off the wolds. And then you're actually into the gallery itself, and it's going through a lot of how the models work. I mean, some of these are the Mark 1 models, such as that Kai the Wildborn. That's the old metal model from Mark 1. Generally speaking, a lot of the Circle models, though, have aged very well from Mark 1. Most of the Circle models I have, or a lot of the Circle models I have, are from Mark 1. They're still very nice, they still look nice. A lot of the newer ones obviously look amazing, but the Mark 1 ones still stand up. The only one I'm not a huge fan of is that Warpwolf Stalker, but I've actually got one of the new plastic ones. And you've got the Skinwalkers, Old Stalkers, a nice bit there. This is the other thing. The Pure Blood Warpwolf from Mark 1 looks really pretty. The plastic version from Mark 2, not so much. So if you're actually getting into Circle and you do really want a Pure Blood, I'd try and see if you can get hold of one of those models, just because they're so much nicer. The Gorax model as well, that's getting a plastic re-release, I think in February this year, and that does look much nicer. Apart from that, you've got a lot of the see, these are the Wolves of Orboros, the Reeves, Wolflord Morag, some of the Sentry Stones, some of the Goats, which, however, they're plastic 3-in-1 that's coming out, I think, March. Does look nicer. The Tharn, I prefer these models. What I'll probably do is I'll be doing a model showcase at some point soon of my Epic Morvana list, which has the old metal ones. I haven't seen the plastic ones in the flesh, but I can't say I'm overly impressed from what I have seen. But you know, maybe they do look nicer in the flesh. Maybe it's just a paint job I've seen on some of the photos online. Then we've got the last page of the blood trackers, which they've been reboxed as a box of 10, but they're still the same models. Very nice. Druid Wilder, Lord of the Feast, and the Warpwolf Extreme, which, to be honest, I don't think it's as nice as some of the other Extreme variants you can get from Privateer Press for some of the other special models. So that is the end of the Circle of Orboros book. A quick rundown. Like I said, I'll be looking to do this for all of the Hordes and then the War Machine books. I mean, at some point then I will probably go into specific details about lists that I personally run, just to give you a flavour of how I run some of the armies, such as Circle, and then try and hopefully at some point get maybe some battle reports or something up here, just so people can see how the armies run and how they work. Okay, so this is Steve the Bear signing off.